The wind came down from the mountains sharp and cold, the kind that carried old regrets and unfinished prayers. Clara Whitmore stood on the far side of the ranch fence, her gloved hands wrapped tight around a bundle of papers she'd folded and unfolded too many times to count. The land stretched endlessly behind the man, leaning against the fence, acres of open pasture, snow-kissed peaks beyond it, and a house that looked more like a fortress than a home. This was Caleb Hart's land. Everyone within 50 miles knew it. They also knew he was a widower, a hard man shaped by grief, and the father of 2 boys who hadn't spoken more than a handful of words since their mother was buried 3 winters ago. Caleb didn't smile when he saw Clara. He rarely smiled at all anymore. His hat shadowed a face carved by sun, sorrow, and responsibility. When he straightened, leather gloves creaking, his eyes went past her at first, toward the road, as if expecting her to turn back. "People usually dead? You shouldn't be here," he said calmly, not unkindly. Clara swallowed. She had nowhere else to go. "I know," she replied. "But I was told you're a man who honors his word." That got his attention. His gaze sharpened, weighing her the way he weighed cattle or weather. She was neat but worn, her dress patched at the seams, her posture proud despite exhaustion. She looked like someone who had lost something. Or everything. "My word isn't for sale," Caleb said. "I'm not here to sell anything," she answered. "I'm here to ask." Silence stretched between them, thick as the clouds overhead. Then from behind Caleb, 2 boys appeared at the fence line. One was older, maybe 10, with eyes too serious for his age. The other clutched his brother's sleeve, half hidden, his gaze locked on Clara with quiet intensity. Caleb didn't turn, but his shoulders stiffened. He knew they were there. "They don't talk much," he said low. "Not to strangers." "I can wait," Clara said softly. Something shifted then, just a crack in the wall he'd built around himself. Caleb motioned toward the house. "Walk with me." They moved along the fence line, the boys following at a careful distance. Clara felt their eyes on her back, felt the weight of being seen as something rare. When Caleb finally stopped, he rested his forearms on the fence and stared out at the land. "My boys need a mother," he said bluntly. Clara's breath caught. "They don't remember how to laugh," he continued. "They don't sleep through the night, and they look at every woman who passes through this place like she might disappear too." Clara turned toward him. "I'm sorry for your loss." "So am I," he said. Then he looked at her fully for the first time. "That's why I'm making you a deal." Her heart pounded. "Be my boy's mother," Caleb said. "Live here. Care for them. Teach them how to be children again." Clara's voice trembled. "And you? I'll give you a home, protection, a name that keeps men from asking questions." His jaw tightened. "And a future you won't find out there." She should have said no. She knew it. But then the younger boy stepped forward and held out a carved wooden horse, its paint chipped, its leg cracked and mended, a peace offering. Clara knelt, tears blurring her vision, and accepted it. "I don't want your money," she said quietly. "I don't want pity." Caleb nodded. "Then don't take the deal." She looked at the boys, then back at him.
"I'll stay," she said.
"But only if this isn't a lie." Caleb extended his hand across the fence. "I don't lie," he said. "And I don't let go of what's mine." Their hands met, rough and trembling, and in that moment, 4 broken hearts took the first step toward becoming a family. Winter came early that year, settling over the Hart Ranch like a long-held breath finally released, and with it came the quiet truth that Clara Whitmore was no longer a guest, nor merely part of a bargain, but a presence woven into the daily rhythm of the house. She rose before dawn, learned the language of the stove and the stubborn moods of the weather, memorized which floorboard creaked near the boys' room so she could avoid waking them at night, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, began to fill the spaces their mother's absence had hollowed out. The boys did not rush her. Eli, the older one, watched her with the careful suspicion of someone who had learned too early that loving someone meant losing them. Noah, smaller and quieter, followed her like a shadow, offering silent companionship rather than words. Clara accepted both forms of affection without asking for more, and in that patience something fragile began to mend. Caleb noticed it in small ways first. The way laughter, soft and surprised, slipped into the house when Clara read aloud by the fire. The way the boys slept longer through the night. The way. Noah reached for her hand without hesitation when storms rattled the windows. Caleb told himself this was the arrangement working exactly as it should, practical, necessary, nothing more. But nights were harder. When the house grew still and the boys slept, Clara often found herself standing at the window, staring out at the moonlit pasture, clutching the carved wooden horse like a promise she hadn't known she was making. Caleb would see the light beneath her door and feel something tighten in his chest, an old ache mixed with something new and dangerous. He avoided her then, burying himself in ledgers or mending tack that didn't need fixing, telling himself he was honoring his late wife by keeping his distance. Yet grief is not loyal and neither is the heart. One night, when a sudden illness left Noah feverish and shaking, Clara sent for Caleb without hesitation. He came running, fear stripping years from his face, and stood helpless as Clara cooled the boy's skin, whispered calm into his ear, and sang a soft, trembling lullaby that seemed to steady the room itself. When Noah finally slept, his small fingers curled tightly into Clara's sleeve, Caleb saw tears on her lashes. Their eyes met then, raw, unguarded, and for the first time since his wife's passing, Caleb felt gratitude that cut deeper than guilt. She wasn't replacing anyone. She was saving something. The ranch hands noticed the change too. The house felt warmer, the meals fuller, the boys less haunted. Whispers traveled fast in a place like that, and not all of them were kind. Some said Clara was after Caleb's land. Others said she was a woman with no past worth mentioning, which meant it must be dark indeed. Clara heard enough to understand, but she held her head high, refusing to defend herself. She had learned long ago that survival sometimes meant silence. Caleb, however, was not so restrained. When a neighbor made a careless remark at the general store, Caleb's response was swift and unmistakable. "She's under my roof," he said, voice cold as steel. And that's the end of it. Word spread just as fast, and after that, no one questioned her place again, at least not aloud. Still, the greatest test of the deal came not from outsiders but from within. As spring crept into the valley and the snow began to melt, the boys grew braver, more curious, more alive, and with that came questions. One evening, as Clara tucked Eli into bed, he asked the question she'd feared since the day she arrived. "Are you going to leave too?" The words were quiet, but they carried the weight of every goodbye he'd ever endured. Clara sat on the edge of the bed and chose honesty over comfort. "I don't plan to," she said, "but staying means choosing it every day." Eli studied her for a long moment, then nodded as if filing that truth away for later. Down the hall, Noah listened, absorbing every word. That night, when Clara closed her door, she cried, not from fear, but from the realization that her heart was already choosing, whether she meant it to or not. Caleb felt the shift as keenly as she did. He found himself looking for her in every room, listening for her steps, measuring his days by whether she smiled or grew quiet. The deal had been clear, simple, safe, but nothing about this felt safe anymore. He wanted her happiness in a way that frightened him, wanted to protect her not because he'd promised to, but because the thought of losing her felt unbearable. When he finally spoke, it was not with the authority of a rancher or the distance of a widower.